So that's Dorji Chung behind me. And I know when I first went to Courtin, and I went straight to the publishing room, because it might be my job all my life, typing and editing and writing. And I was very happily doing all the prayers and doing all the gestetna, the rodeo, old-fashioned days, you know. And I kept coming up with this name, Vajradhara. And then I'd come up with this person called Dorji Chung. And then I discovered he was the same. And I was so happy because I just liked him. Whoever he was, I liked him, this Buddha. So I said to Lama Yeshe, when Lama Yeshe would come in sometimes, he'd say, I said to Lama, who's Dorji Chung, Lama? I've told the story before. And he said, he's the biggest Buddha, dear. He didn't give me this long, complicated intellectual answer, you know, about being the tantric aspect of Shakyamuni Buddha. And I know I felt so proud that I liked the biggest Buddha. So that's Dorji Chung. And in the different traditions, they show different aspects, but this is the tantric aspect of the Buddha, same, but just different kind of, they dress up in different clothes, you know, basically. So Buddha mind is the Buddha mind is the Buddha mind. Okay, darling people, we continue. And I'm sorry to mislead you yesterday. I sounded like it was the end, and I thought it was because I forgot about the weekend. I think it's just old age. I'm getting Alzheimer's or something. I hope not, but I forgot. So then here we are again to continue. We did the essence of it all yesterday. So we'll just go again. We'll go over it again and go a bit more deep and ask questions and investigate and things like that, okay? So we think we're here together for this couple of hours, whatever it is. So we can listen to these teachings, so we can understand something from it, so we can take it as tools, so we can develop our potential, so we can be of benefit to others. That's the plan. Sangye Chodan Soke Chobnam La Jancho Badu Dagi Kapsu Chi Dagi Chunyan Gipe Sonam Ki Drola Penche Sangye Drupa Shog. So we're thinking until we are enlightened, we're going to rely upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And then for the karmic seeds we put into our mind from listening to these teachings, may they ripen, no matter how long it takes, as our Buddhahood in the future, so we can be a benefit to others. That's the plan, okay? Okay, so the crucial thing is also always to understand all the teachings in the bigger picture to see where they fit. This is so incredibly important. This is what I tried to stress continuously yesterday, you know? And in just the same way, if you're studying anything, you can't go leap into the advanced level without first having a ground in the starting levels. It's just obvious, you know? But nevertheless, like I did say, we can all be beginners effectively, but because we might have taken refuge, taken bodhisattva vows, taken the highest yoga tantra empowerment, taken the tantric vows, with all the tools in our toolkit, we can still be a beginner, but we can do them according to our capacity. So the essential point is, as the commonest question people say is, am I qualified to take an empowerment? Well, first of all, there is different levels of practice. And very simply, roughly speaking, we can say there's Kriya, what they call action tantra. Then there's a second one called yoga tantra, or another one, I forget, performance tantra or something. And then there's highest, they call highest. So, you know, if you've been around and you've seen pictures and you've heard names in the teachings, you've heard about Tara, Chenrezig, Medicine Buddha, you know, Manjushri. They're all the first level. So these you don't need to receive an empowerment in order to do them. But obviously to receive the empowerment brings you the special blessings, there's no question. But so-called highest tantra, or they call it highest yoga tantra, Maha Anuttara Yoga Tantra. You can't do these without having received the empowerment. So, and these are Buddhas called, for example, Yamantaka, Vajrayogini, Heruka Chakrasamvara, Hevajra, many of these. So with these you receive, you know, and then we also talked about the 3 levels of vows. There's 3 levels of practice relating to the 3 levels of vows. So like we said yesterday, they've got the Pratimoksha, individual liberation. They're the vows you would take the first and second scopes, or the junior school and high school. They're the teachings we share with the Theravadan path. If you're in Burma or Thailand, they're the same teachings, the same practices. These are the ones we share with them, is the way we say it. So that the lay person's vows and the monks and nuns' vows are these level. And these vows are like I said before, are kind of like playing safe. You just don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, don't this, don't that. A vow is a decision to refrain from something. And these are just the vows of refraining from harming. And the benefit to oneself of living in vows of refraining from harming is that it produces the results of your own liberation. I mean, you're the beneficiary, you know. But of course, as Lama Yeshe says, if you're living in vows of not killing, the direct beneficiary is you, but the rats and roaches are very happy. They'll have a party because you leave them in peace. So indirectly, sentient beings are the beneficiaries also of you behaving nicely. And all that's encompassed in its first stages of practice, the sutra teachings of the Buddha. Then you got the Mahayana path, the compassion wing. And the vows here are called the Bodhisattva vows. And these are vows of all of these, the Pratimoksha vows and the Bodhisattva vows are the vows of the morality or the ethics of restraint, refraining from harming. All these vows at that level. Then you've got even the Tantric vows. And they all say, don't do this and don't do that and don't do this and don't do that. And as Alex Berzin said, as I quoted yesterday, vows are this kind of subtle form in the mind that shape your behavior. It's such a sweet way to put it. And when we understand this really properly, not just some as religious concept, we realize we're doing this all the time. You know, if you're driving a car, you're living in so many hundreds of vows. You're vowing. You don't call it a vow. You don't go to your driving test and say, what are your vows? You'll answer the questions. What are you allowed not to do? What should you not do? You shouldn't go over the speed limit. You shouldn't put the wheel. They don't say this, but when you drive, there's hundreds of things you learn. In other words, it's learning to shape your behavior into the behavior of a good car driver. Analyze it. It is logical. Everything we do in our lives with our body and speech, it's shaping our body and speech to do a certain behavior according to our culture. The way we dress, how we go to the toilet, how we sit at meals, how we hold our knife, how we hold our fork. Everything we do is our body and speech. That is behavior. You know? It's a very interesting concept. That's absolutely what we understand, but we don't think of it like this. We mystify religious vows, like someone sitting on top of you, squashing you, telling you don't do this, and if you do it, you'll get punished. That's the childish way we think about it. So when you understand vows as a way of shaping your behavior in order for you to become a Buddha, wow, who wouldn't want to take the vows? It's so clear. They're all the morality of restraint, of refraining from harming. Then when you get to the Bodhisattva path and you've accomplished bodhicitta, now you start to practice the morality of benefiting others. So in other words, that's a really high thing. To be able to benefit others, as Dalai Lama says, compassion is not enough. It's the point, but you've got to have wisdom. So the only time you can really benefit others is when you have clairvoyance. I mean, think about this. We stumble along with zero wisdom, driven by our attachment and our anger, running around trying to help people, half the time making a mess. Because we don't have any wisdom whatsoever. We have no idea what's best for the other person because we're driven by our own neuroses. So this idea that all the first levels of practice are the vows of the morality of refraining from harming. Then when you've finally got bodhicitta, some semblance of wisdom, now you can begin to benefit. And that's the 6 perfections. And you go from life to life, accumulating this vast, meritorious, virtuous energy of benefiting others based on wisdom. Then you have the Tantric vows, you know. And they're all in that. They're totally to do with forming your behavior in order for you to be able finally to access your subtle mind so you can transform it into the mind of a Buddha. So vows are stupendously important. We don't even think about vows. We think they're boring. We have no idea what they mean, you know. They say if you keep your vows purely, the 3 sets of vows, you're certain to be enlightened in a certain number of lifetimes. You cannot possibly be a Buddhist without living in vows. You cannot possibly become a Buddha without living in vows. So when you understand this psychologically, it makes sense, you know. So, of course, you have to know the vows. Most of us haven't got a clue. Even the 18 root bodhisattva vows, not to mention the 46 secondary ones, not to mention the 6 set, the whatever it is, the tantric vows. There's the 14 root vows. There's a whole bunch of secondary vows, all slightly framed differently by different teachers. All of them are to help shape our behavior, because behavior is your body and speech in order for your mind to do its job, you know. This is an absolute prerequisite if you want to practice Tantra. Absolute prerequisite. You've got to have refuge, bodhisattva vows, and finally, tantric vows. So in the high yoga tantric practices, when you take the empowerments and you take the tantric vows, they're all related to, keeping the 19 commitments of the 5 Buddha families. And the 5 Buddha families basically, you see, in Tantra, all this, like I said yesterday, it's basically psychology. And if you want to take like a little family tree, you've got Dharmakaya at the top. Dharmakaya is a Sanskrit word that refers to the pure, unmanifest, all-knowing, all-compassionate, all-pervasive mind. No shape, no form, just pure wisdom and compassion, disembodied. Mind is not physical. That's Buddha, the actual meaning of the word Buddha. Now, because Buddha, we poor peanuts can't access that. We can't access the pure, subtle mind of the Buddha. It's similar to Christian teachings. God is all-knowing, all-pervasive, exists in the universe. But, he sent his son called Jesus, who manifests in a human form. He's the embodiment of God. This concept is very similar, except, of course, there's no concept of a creator. In fact, I always tell the story, when I had to give a talk at the Catholic University in Melbourne. Went to a Catholic convent there. And I didn't know what I was going to talk about till I got there. I've always told the story. And I looked up the dictionary. What's the definition of God? 3 qualities. This is a Christian teaching, okay? 3 qualities. Infinite wisdom, infinite compassion, infinite power. I thought, well, that's interesting. They're the 3 qualities of a Buddha. So it really sees, I would like to say it like this, it really shows that over the centuries, in all different cultures, human beings in their pursuit of wisdom, pursuit of trying to understand the universe, have come up with many similar findings, but very many different interpretations, So anyway, my 20-minute talk was the similarities between the definition of God and Buddha. And I always say, I'm not sure the Catholics liked it, but, because Buddha is not a creator, and that's very shocking for Christians. So anyway, this is what a Buddha's mind is: infinite wisdom, infinite compassion, infinite power. But it has to manifest in a human form for us to recognize, because we don't have the access. We don't have access to our subtle mind. Therefore, we can't access Buddha. So we need a body to see and hear. Well, there's 2 of those. One is so down on the family tree. You go down 1 onto the family tree, and it's called Rupakaya. There's 1 form body. Form body is called Rupakaya. Then you go out, and there's 2 of those. 2 of those. One is called the Nimanakaya. Emanation body, it's called that. And the form, I haven't got behind me this time, I haven't got Shakyamuni Buddha behind me this time, but the form in the human form, roughly speaking, the human form, that's the emanation body. So at the time of Buddha in India, when we look at statues, we see Buddha, oh, there's Buddha, we'll say. And I always say, if you're back in India at the time of Lord Buddha, you just see this sadhu, there are millions of sadhus. India was covered in sadhus, all running around, doing their trip, discovering reality and giving teachings in their yellow robes, their saffron robes. You could not have told the difference between Buddha and any other sadhu. He didn't have a little halo on saying, hello, I'm a Buddha. That's why he said, check up on, and he was called the guru. He was the teacher in the human form. His mind was the mind of the Buddha, but you can't tell. So it's exactly the same for us in these days. We also need a teacher. He was the guru then. He embodied Buddha then. Well, same now. So His Holiness Dalai Lama is said to be a Buddha. Okay, you've got to find out. You've got to have some confidence. But here's the emanation body. Our own Lama, our practice is to see, and this is a crucial point today, let's talk about why we need a teacher. It's so clear. At the time of the Buddha, everybody else was just like us. They couldn't have heard Buddha's teachings if Buddha hadn't manifested in a human body and spoke words that they could hear. It's exactly the same now. The guru now is the same as Buddha then. There's no difference. There's a human person. Now, you can't tell if they're a Buddha. This is the tricky bit, because we're not clairvoyant. Nobody on the planet could have said that was a Buddha then, unless you were a Buddha yourself. So that's why he said, don't believe what I say. Check up. So you have to check up, get confidence that this person is valid. Then you'd have confidence that he is the Buddha. That's our job now. And this is the heart practice in all these deity practices. This is the heart practice. So let's look at the logic of that. If there's no logic to these things, it's just nonsense. We believe mystical means not logical, opposite for the Buddha. If it's not logical, it doesn't exist. If you can't prove it intellectually first, it's not true. This is quite shocking to hear. So, Buddha at the time, that was the emanation body. But then Buddha manifested another body, which is why now we're discussing Vajrayana, and that's called the enjoyment body, or the Sambhogakaya. And that's a subtle, and this one, Vajradhara, Here's the Sambhogakaya form of the Buddha. Shakyamuni is the emanation form. This Dorji Chung Vajradhara is the Sambhogakaya form, the subtle light body, the bodhisattva style. He's not a monk. Look at him. He's naked with his girlfriend, That ain't a monk's behavior, I promise. So Shakyamuni is a monk. That monk is the manifestation of the first level of practice, which is the Pratimoksha vows. The Pratimoksha vows, the path of individual liberation, the sutra path, the Pratimoksha vows, the Buddha, the monk, is literally a visual manifestation of that level of practice. The harnessing of the body, speech, and mind, the subduing of the body, speech, and mind. That's the Pratimoksha level. That's the junior school, high school level. That's the wisdom wing level. That's the sutra level. Then you have the tantric level. Blissful, radiant, the manifestation of, this is, the image of the Buddha is to subdue us, Sakyamuni. This image is to energize us. So Vajradhara is the biggest Buddha, as Lama Yeshe put it so nicely. Here's the manifestation in the tantric form, in the Sambhogakaya form of the Buddha mind. Same Buddha mind, different aspect, different teaching, different psychology, different approach. So in the sutra practice, manifesting as Shakyamuni is to subdue the body, speech, and mind, harness the crazy energy of the body, speech, and mind, to get complete control over it, such to the point where you've rid the mind of all delusions. Now the mind is radiant, clear, subdued, ethical, blissful, happy, joyful, peaceful, compassionate, and wise. This is another aspect, another approach. So that's the Sambhogakaya form. And under him are the 5 Buddha families. Akshobhya, Amitabha, Vairocana, Amoghasiddhi, Ratnasambhava. Each of them is a manifestation of the purified aspect of 5 delusions, maybe 6. Let me read Lama Yeshe. I have to read to you from this, or read Lama Zopa. These 5 Buddha families are just manifestations of different qualities. But the point in Tantra, in the beginning stage, Shakyamuni is the harnessing and the subduing of the delusions. Here in Tantra, it's more sophisticated. The advanced practitioner can, as we've been discussing, transform and utilize and transform the delusions. And this is why emptiness is so crucial to understand. Without understanding emptiness, this is a load of rubbish. It's schizophrenic nonsense to say you can use anger, use attachment, use jealousy. It's like a joke. Let me get this text and read out to you Lama Zopa, Lama Yeshe, and also Alex Berzin's words about these 5 Buddha families. It's very sweet. It's again showing the tantric psychology. I have to find my text. Everything's in my computer, but I'm not using my computer because my hotspotting got upset and all weird. So I've got to find the right text in my iPad library, which is dreadfully organized. What's this? Won't be long. God knows that I've got it here. No, where is it? I'm so sorry. Here we go. Okay, let's look at this one. All right, let's have a look. Okay. Oh. What happened? Wow, where is it? Oh, here we go. Okay. The vows and commitments, secondary vows, 14, the 5 Buddha families. Okay, here we go. 186. All right. So when you're taking the Untitled Tantra vows, they're all framed in terms of the 5, keeping these 19 commitments of the 5 Buddha families. And they're all just this vow. A vow is a decision to refrain from something. A commitment is a decision to do something. And just like everything you learn, you have to learn the instructions, how to play the piano, what you do. This is all this, it's the instructions of how to turn yourself into a Buddha. So, okay, this is Berzin talking. Let's look at Lama Zopa first. Where's Lama Zopa's words for this? This is Berzin or, yeah, here we go. So now, okay. So according to Courtin Rinpoche, the 5 types of Buddhas, these 5 Buddha families, because, okay, just to finish, there's underneath Vajradhara is the 5 Buddha families, and under each of those is all the thousands and thousands of the other Buddhas. They all belong to these different families, psychologically speaking. So, for example, Amitabha, who is the manifestation of purified attachment energy, Tara is in his family, Chenrezig is in his family, Vajrayogini is in his family, Haruka Chakrasambhara is in his family, Hayagriva is in his family. All of them are different psychological energies. It's nothing cosmic, it's just not how we think of psychology. So now, according to Courtin Rinpoche, the 5 types of Buddhas are related to the 5 delusions. The cessation of those delusions manifesting as a deity. It can also be said that the 5 impure aggregates have been purified. So the 5 aggregates is this teaching that Lord Buddha gave, where he broke down into 5 components a person. And these are the 5 aggregates. This comes up a lot in all the teachings. It's the way Buddha described, broke down into 5 components a person. He also, the 5 aggregates also refers to all the impermanent phenomena of the universe. But here the 5 aggregates of a person. Form, which is your body. Feeling and discrimination, which are 2 of the 51 mental factors that play a really major role in our in our suffering, and therefore in our getting of happiness. And then the non-associated compounded phenomena, which is like a grab bag of leftover bits and pieces. And then 5th, consciousness. These are the 5 aggregates. So here, the particular thing is the delusions. So the purity of this mind that is achieved by ceasing anger manifests as the akshobhya. He's blue, dark blue. The purity of the mental continuum, the mind, achieved by the cessation of ignorance, the root delusion, manifests as varochana. He's white. The purity of the mental continuum achieved by ceasing pride and miserliness manifests as the Buddha Ratnasambhava, and he's green. The purity of this mental continuum achieved by ceasing jealousy manifests as the deity Amoghasiddhi, and he's yellow. Maybe the other way around. Ratnasambhava. I think he's green, yeah. And then the purity of this mental continuum experienced by ceasing attachment manifests as Amitabha, and he's red. So each Buddha sits on a different throne. The elephant signifies ignorance, and when ignorance has been completely purified, including the seed and the imprint, the cessation manifests as Varochana. Therefore, Buddha Varochana is seated on a throne supported by elephants. The horse signifies jealousy. So to signify the cessation of jealousy in the mental continuum, Buddha Amoghasiddhi is seated on a throne supported by horses, and so forth. So in the Tantric text Semo, it says, the bodhisattva who wishes to live life in the pure conduct of secret mantra, it's another term for Vajrayana, Mantrayana, Tantrayana, should protect the samaya, or the commitment, word of honor, or samaya, or pledge. Samaya is a Sanskrit, or damtsig in Tibetan. So the bodhisattva who wishes to live life, and by definition, the bodhisattva path is Tantra. You can't do Tantra without bodhicitta. It's like a joke, The bodhisattva who wishes to live life in the pure contact of secret mantra, Vajrayana, should protect the commitment of reliance on the virtuous friend, keep the Vajra and bell, the samaya of the mudra, the samaya of eating, the samaya of protection, as taught by Vajradhara. So it's just these quoting things, okay, and there's not too much to talk about there. So now, each in the Tantric Vows, there's 19 commitments. There's about Tantric Vows is 14 root ones and a whole bunch of other ones, but they're all related to these 5 Buddha families, and it's all broken down into 19 commitments of these 5 Buddha families. So it's just another variation of don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, don't this, don't that. Just variations of it, but at another level, you know? So on and so forth. No need to go into these details. So what you're trying to do is taking the tantric vows is again shape your behavior in such a way that you, when you get concentration, can access your subtle mind and transform it into the mind of a Buddha. And that's why Tantra said to be so quick. They talk about how we have to accumulate the immense amount of wisdom and accumulate immense amount of morality, of virtue, or merit, they call it. So in a sense, it's a bit like you need, like, you know, you need like a, in order to, let's say, you need a certain amount of, it takes you a certain amount of time to get somewhere. So if you practice on the tantric path, it is said that you accumulate. No, sorry, what's another analogy? It's like you've got to accumulate a certain amount of wisdom and a certain amount of merit. That's how they used to say. And the amount of merit and wisdom that makes you a Buddha, if you practice a sutra path, it takes you countless eons. If you practice the tantric path, it's a skillful means whereby you create these together. That's what they say. On the sutra path, you have to do, when you're sitting in meditation, you are accumulating wisdom. When you bop around in your lifetime after lifetime working for sentient beings, you are accumulating merit. But the tantric path, there's something skillful, technologically speaking, about the tantric teachings and the tantric practices, whereby you can accumulate the wisdom and merit together. And these are technical points. One has to study it. So that's why it's said to be quick. And of course, like I said, you know, the reason we hear it's quick, we get all excited, you know. Oh, I want to do the quick one. But like I said, a bodhisattva is prepared to walk 1,000 miles on their hands and knees to benefit sentient beings. But if they can fly, clearly they'd rather fly because it's better for the sentient beings. But they're prepared to walk if they have to. You don't just get the fast trip because because it's quicker. Got to have this enormous enthusiasm. And so in other words, what really defines, what really expresses these tantric yogis is their bodhicitta. That's really what the tantric path is about. You know, it's about these outrageously powerful, compassionate beings being skillful enough because they've smashed their ego to utilize these powerful techniques of transforming their mind into the mind of a Buddha very quickly because of their compassion. Without bodhicitta, it is impossible, utterly, completely, and totally impossible. A friend of mine who does, Paula, she's done years and years of 4-year, 3-year tantric retreats. I interviewed her in Mandala, this was 20 years ago, and she talked about how she was very excited about doing a retreat. And then in her retreat, she would do her Lam Rim meditations, which is meditations on impermanence, meditations on compassion, meditation on emptiness, all the points of the Lam Rim. And she said she was really happy about doing the Lam Rim meditations during her tantric retreat because it would help her get tantric realizations. And then she realized at the end of the 4-year retreat that actually the reason to do the tantric retreat was that helps you get Lam Rim realizations. And Lam Rim means realizing impermanence, realizing emptiness, realizing bodhicitta. And so the tantric methods helped her accomplish those. So all the methods in Buddhism, including Tantra, are to help you get bodhicitta and wisdom. That's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. And without bodhicitta, that is outrageous paradigm shift in the mind that puts others before self. It's like a joke to do the tantric path. And this is why they talk about it being dangerous. Okay, now this is where we have to understand attachment. And we learn about attachment in high school, okay? In junior school, you control the servants of attachment. You just don't follow it. You control your body. You control your speech. You don't vomit out words. You don't jump on every boy you like. You don't eat every piece of cake you like. You learn discipline, control your behavior. Why? Because they're driven by attachment and aversion and the other delusions, and they cause you suffering. So then you get to high school and you start to get into the mind. You drill down into the mind and you get to understand attachment. The essence of renunciation, the second scope, is to understand attachment. As Buddha says in the Four Noble Truths, attachment is effectively the main cause of all suffering, of all realms, of all existence, of all sentient beings since beginningless time. Of course, ignorance is the root delusion. but effectively attachment. And that means we have to understand this entire realm of existence is the fruit of attachment. This entire realm of existence, all the trees and moons and stars and things out there, the sense objects, they're all sense objects by definition. And who's created these? We have over eons of time with attachment. So to understand attachment is absolutely stupendously, impossibly, without it, it's impossible to understand Buddhism. It is impossible to understand Buddhism. It is impossible to understand Tantra. It's like a joke if you don't understand attachment, what it is, you know. And as I always talk, it's multifaceted and goes to unbelievably subtle levels. Now, the key point is this. This is the thing. This is how you can understand why you can utilize attachment, which sounds so peculiar to us. Okay, the function of all the delusions, the key function of all the delusions, all the neuroses, all the misconceptions, the key function, there are two. One is they make you very unhappy. They're disturbing. They're very distressing. The extent to which you've got anxiety, attachment, anger, jealousy, low self-esteem is the extent to which you are miserable. This is a fact and easily provable. But the other one is this, and this is the key. And we don't understand this. We don't understand Buddhism. We don't understand Buddhist psychology. We can't possibly practice Tantra. We don't understand bodhicitta. Can't understand anything. Is that the delusions are this distinct set of states of mind that are completely separate and opposite to the virtuous states of mind. So there's love, for example. Love is a delight in the mind when you see someone happy. It's connected to others. It's rooted in some sense of interdependence in reality. Compassion is empathy for the suffering of others. What can I do to help? Delusions are the opposite. They're completely I-based. They're totally neurotic. If you mainly had delusions, you'd be what's called a psychopath. This is a fact. A psychopath is a person who doesn't have much access to their virtue. That's all, using the Buddhist view. And it's like they're the states of mind of a mentally ill person. Our saving grace is our virtue. That's why we don't go around killing and raping too many people who've got some access to some virtue. How miraculous. But attachment and all the other delusions have this particular function of exaggerating, of distorting, of exaggerating. They're all got their own objects. So cake, handsome body, tea, all the objects outside there. Attachment, when they grasp onto that object, attachment makes it appear more marvelous than it really is. It does other things, but that's its essential job. It exaggerates the deliciousness of the object. So now listen to this. When you've given up attachment, when you've achieved, some levels of renunciation, you've got bodhicitta, and your virtues are rampant and unbelievable, and you might not yet even have realized emptiness, but you've really subdued your attachment. Listen to this point. This is the point. When you see the cake, you don't believe in what the attachment is showing you. It makes it look more delicious. But this is the thing, because when you've given up attachment, okay, the relationship, we discussed it a bit yesterday, there's an intimate relationship between attachment and happiness, attachment and pleasant feelings. This is the thing to understand. Attachment, that fisherman, because he had a tendency to kill, it triggered that memory when he saw the fishing. It triggered very pleasant feelings, and then attachment exaggerated the fishing and it made it look divine to him, and he believed it was the cause of his happiness, and he bought into that view. That's how we live our lives. We believe the cake is more delicious than it really is. We believe that boyfriend is more delicious than he really is. And then when we have, this is the point, we have contact with him, it does trigger pleasure. This is a fact. It does trigger pleasure. It does trigger pleasure, but the pleasure is contaminated. It's like the pleasure of a junkie. Now, when you are a yogi or yogini and you've given up attachment, you stop believing, you know with certainty that cake is not more delicious than it looks. You know its nature. Even you realize emptiness, even you know its true nature. You're not fooled by it. But listen to this. You still have a body made of the five senses. And when you eat that cake, it's going to trigger 1,000 times more pleasure than if you're a junkie believing in the junkie cake. In other words, when you've realized emptiness, your tongue doesn't fall out. Your tongue doesn't stop having sensory experiences. You have a body of the senses. And that's what Tantra is all about. So when you're a yogi, you've got renunciation, you've got bodhicitta, you've realized emptiness. You've still got a human body. You still have the 5 senses. So when you taste that cake, it still triggers not just a little bit of pleasure, 1,000,000 times more pleasure, because you've got no delusions. You're not grasping at it. So it triggers even more pleasure than an ordinary person, because that's the nature of a sensory body. And that's what Tantra is all about. So the yogi who's got given up, got renunciation, given up attachment, given up, realized emptiness and got bodhicitta, easy peasy, falling off a log, easy. They can access objects of the senses easily, and it will trigger the most stupendous bliss and pleasure. And that bliss, which is very nice pleasure, combined with concentration, is what enables the mind to get to the subtlest level. And with that level of mind, you can become a Buddha. So literally, it's the bliss that is utilized, not the attachment. It's the bliss. But you look now, because we're junkies, even just when you're slightly thirsty, you have a glass of water, your mind goes berserk. As Lama Yeshe says, when you can have attachment object without the mind going berserk, that's the skill we need to learn to practice. So the yogi has given up attachment, has got renunciation, has got bodhicitta. They've still got a body of the senses. It's going to do what it does. So when it sees that gorgeous boy or that gorgeous girl or that gorgeous cake, they don't believe the nonsense of attachment. They know the truth of that being, but still with access, even just their eyes looking at the cake gives them pleasure. Ears listening to that music triggers pleasure, because pleasure is simply the fundamental, neither good nor bad, capacity of the mind to have a feeling. Are we communicating, people? This is like technical. It's not hippy trippy rubbish, the vomit that's talked in the West. It's technical. So if you don't understand how delusions exaggerate, and if you don't understand the nature of the sensory body, which is a product of attachment, then you won't know how to fix attachment, and you won't know how to use it. Of course you won't. You won't have a clue. Pleasure, happiness, bliss, joy, ecstasy, rapture, nice feeling. They're all variations of levels of good feelings. And this is why they're in the 3rd category of states of mind. They're neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. And if we don't understand these 3 categories, we don't understand Buddhist psychology. We don't talk like this in modern psychology. It sounds weird. Virtuous, non-virtuous, neutral. What are you talking about? We don't have this view. This is Buddha's view. You've got to study it. Feeling, you only have 2 kinds in a day, pleasant or unpleasant. There's a 3rd kind called neutral. Don't worry about those. We all want the pleasant ones. It's called happiness. We all don't want the unhappy ones. It's called suffering. So suffering is not a physical thing. Happiness is not a physical thing, but we think they are. So we don't know this. We can't understand how to sort out all these states of mind. Therefore, we don't know what bliss is and wouldn't know how to use it. It's all meaningless to us. It's all kind of wishy-washy rubbish. Are there any questions, please? I need questions from people, just so that we communicate to some degree, because I'm saying things the best I can in my style.
Venerable, David Lee has a question.
Good, David, please talk to me. I can scroll through and see if I can find you. Go, David, talk. Here you are, good. Talk to me, David.
Venerable, I had a question about Ratnasambhava.
Okay.
And he represents the purification of the aggregate of feeling. And I wasn't sure how that related to emptiness.
He represents what did you say, Ratnasambhava? He represents, he's to do with, so what did you say, what are you saying about Ratnasambhava?
Purification of the aggregate of feeling.
Sorry, say it again, what? What are you saying? I can't hear you. This really crunchy voice.
Purification of the aggregate of feeling.
Oh, yes. Okay, good. Fine. So
Miserliness and pride. And I don't know how that all relates to emptiness.
It doesn't. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, I thought all the aggregates, form, feeling, perception, that they were, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, feeling.
Oh, yeah, okay, no, that's something different. No, that's, of course, form is empty, and so is everything else empty, but that's not what the discussion is here. We're talking conventional reality here. We're talking conventional reality, not ultimate reality. So within that, Everything has a specific meaning. This is the dealing with the conventional truths of things. So these 5 Buddha families, we're not discussing emptiness here. We're discussing one Buddha, one family is this and one is that, one purifies this, one purifies that. We're dealing with the conventions of reality, not the ultimate here. We're not discussing emptiness here. We're discussing a particular quality of Ratnasambhava. It's the purification on the one hand, isn't it, of whatever we said before, I forget. Ratnasambhava, is a purification of ceasing of pride and miserliness. And it's also, we're talking about in terms of the aggregates. Let's look at Alex Berzin. We'll go into those. That's a good point. Let's do that. Alex Berzin describes the aggregates. But we're not discussing emptiness here, David. It's another discussion. So the 5 Buddha families, Berzin, he talks differently. He says other things. So Virachana. So he says Virachana, is the body. This is the aggregates now. So he says, this is the relation to the body. So it's the body, the form aggregate, and the mirror-like. There's different things. It represents, it's purified. So Virachana is purified ignorance, for example, and it's also purifying the form aggregate, which is the physical. And it's also referring to the mirror-like deep wisdom. These are the things, when you learn the death process, you're learning to purify the aggregates, each of the 5 aggregates, each of the 4 senses. It's a deconstruction of all these different components that they say we are made up of. So one is you have that mirror-like wisdom at the first one, the very first of the 35 stages of death, which is divided into 8 stages. The first one is the ceasing of the form, the ceasing of the earth element, and the ceasing of this mirror-like deep wisdom. So like that. And then you've got Ratnasambhava. Ratnasambhava is the yes, that's right, is a purification of the feeling aggregate. So that's the second stage of death, when the feeling begins to, the pleasant, you can't distinguish between pleasant, unpleasant, and indifferent feelings. They kind of all merge. That occurs at that time. And it's also, and the wisdom of this equality ceases to function at that point. And it also represents the purification, as we said before. Now I've lost the page. No, I've completely lost the page. Clicked on the wrong thing. Sorry, have to go back.
What is the wisdom of equality?
It's the distinguishing between, it's the seeing these the pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, seeing them as equal or something like that. That's how they talk about it. These 3 feelings, pleasant, we only have 3 kinds of feelings: pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So the mirror-like wisdom of equality is, I think, the seeing of these 3 is similar or something like that, David. I mean, these things, the death process is so helpful because it describes all these points, all of these components that deconstruct. I can't find the page. Is it satisfying or not, David? Are you not happy?
I'm very pleased, thank you.
Okay. I'm happy to send you this document with these different teachings in it, if you'd like me to do
I
so.
would appreciate it.
It's got all the Tantric vows, all the Bodhisattva vows, and all these different explanations in it. It's quite helpful. So if you'd like it, have I got your email, David?
I have yours. Yeah, I'll have
you
yours.
email me, and I'll send it to you. No problem. I have to look up the contents again. I'm getting confused what pages. So any other questions, people? Are there any other questions, folks? Please ask me. I don't know that much. But I can tell you something. Are there any other questions? Please. Any questions at all?
Yes. Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Talk to me.
It's Merwood. I have a question about bliss and what you just described in terms of using attachment and then letting go of your delusions. And then once you're letting go of your delusions, you see the same object and it engenders a state of bliss in you. But
no, not quite as broad as that. More specifically, Mary, when attachment is in the mind, attachment's job is, when we're caught up in attachment and believing in the story, it's the emotional hunger, it's neurotic, it's deluded, it's desperate, it's frantic, and then it exaggerates the deliciousness, and it causes us to believe the cake is delicious. It then causes us to believe the cake will give me happiness, and then we stuff ourselves with the cake and we end up. So that's the drama of being caught up in attachment. So when you're a yogi, you're yogini, and you've given up attachment, which means you no longer are buying into the bullshit of attachment. You are not fooled any longer, and you realize emptiness, and you know the true nature of the cake. Then you still have a body of the 5 senses, and then when you eat that cake, it will trigger incredible pleasure, far more pleasure than the normal dumb person. That's what I said. So what's the question?
Okay. I think I understand that now. But
Good.
there's one little related thing about bliss, which is the bliss.
Call it pleasure. Call it pleasant feelings. And there are different levels of it. That's all.
I was thinking about the bliss that comes when you are a bodhisattva, or when you have realized emptiness. Then you always live in a kind of
Of course you do. Your mind, put it simple words. Can we do that? Even when you've got single pointed concentration, your mind is incredibly joyful, naturally, because even for that period they're in concentration, your mind is at least free from the delusions. So the presence in our mind of delusions equals the amount of misery and unpleasant feelings, and the less delusions, the more virtue, the more pleasant feelings. So it's a gradual process. So by the time you get to realizing emptiness, by the time you get to getting bodhicitta, you're just insanely joyful all the time, because delusions have gone.
Okay.
You with me?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. What else, people? These are good questions. It's wonderful. Go on, talk to me. Anything else? So then Berzin talks about, he talks about each one. He's very helpful. So he talks about this other way. So Ratnasambhava, so first I'll start with this one. Virchana, as we discussed, the purification of the cessation. He's the purification of ignorance, manifesting as Virchana. Here now, Berzin talks about in relation to the aggregates. So he represents the purified aggregate of form. Form is the physical. He also is also, and this is what happens at the time of death. Form ceases to function, earth element ceases to function, and then this mirror-like wisdom, which is the ability to reflect lots of different things all the time. So as we just looking around the room, we can distinguish between a million different things. This color, that shape, this thing there. That's an ability every single day that we have, that we need, discrimination. And this mirror-like wisdom reflects all this back to us. This begins to cease at the time of death. So in each of the 19 commitments to the 5 Buddha families, there are 6, for example, practices related to this one. Then it gets to Ratnasambhava. And it's the feeling, as David said, it's the second of the 5 aggregates, this feeling, which is not virtuous or non-virtuous. In the third category, which I call the mechanics of the mind, we either have pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feelings. Forget the neutral, we have pleasant and unpleasant. We have very unpleasant, which is called suffering, which is called intense suffering. You get a punch in the nose, or you have a vague feeling of slight unhappiness when you stub your toe. These unhappy feelings, unpleasant feelings, to the most intense unpleasant feelings, where people go completely mad. And then you have pleasant feelings, joy, happiness, these ones. So this is the second one, Ratnasambhava purified, representing the purification of those, the equalizing of these, they say like that. Berzin's commentary is very helpful. Third one, Amitabha, as we've been discussing from Lama Zopa, is a manifestation of purified attachment energy. So this is also this ability to distinguish, this is the one I said before, sorry, to distinguish between this and that. It's a totally crucial part of our mind, totally unbelievably important. Discrimination between this and that. And the key one we have to use to develop that is to use the discrimination in our mind between delusions and virtues. That's what we need most. And also this, so like that. And then you've got Amoghasiddhi. This is purification of the 4th aggregate called Compositional Factors. They all seem very abstract to us until we study them, This 4th one, Compositional Factors, is all a whole bunch, like a grab bag left over all the different impermanent bits and pieces of us that are not included in the other 4. And this also purifies particularly intention, which is one of the main of the mental factors. Also is a manifestation of purified jealousy. Atrobia, he's a manifestation of anger, okay, and also purification of the general consciousness itself. And then the deep awareness of the sphere of reality. I mean, these things are quite abstract. We have to study them, And each are more subtle than the other. And this is what deconstructs as we get through the death process. So there's that. What can I say? And then there are all these commitments related to all these in order to be able to harness our energy so we can purify all of these, so we can become a Buddha. It's, as Lama Yeshe says, Tantra is very technical. And it's dealing with the subtler physical and mental energies, not the grosser ones, So it's quite sophisticated stuff. That's it. It's interesting. Any questions, people? What would you like me to talk about now? Yes, David.
Yeah, in terms of Akshobhya, he represents the attainment of Dhamma Dhatu wisdom. Is that about the attainment
That's
of
how
realization of emptiness?
Yeah, that's right. That's really that. And Berzin calls it the deep awareness of the sphere of reality, the Dhamma Dhatu. Yeah, that would be related to emptiness. That definitely would be, yes. That's right. That's the last one. In terms of the death process, this aggregate of consciousness is the final one to go. And that's the subtlest one, yes. So that would be emptiness, exactly. Roughly speaking, David, yes, exactly. What else, people? Anything else? Nothing?
Well,
What would you like me to talk about?
Could you speak more about Dhamma Dhatu?
No. You mean emptiness? I can talk a bit about emptiness, yeah. I mean, I never use the word Dhamma Dhatu. I don't know, the sphere of reality, whatever. Let's talk about emptiness, okay. Let's talk about emptiness, okay. Well, one interesting point, one person asked His Holiness, how do I apply emptiness in daily life? Which is really what we would like to know, isn't it? And the answer was so simple, so embarrassingly simple, it's shocking. But his answer tells us it's dependent arising. And I'll tell you, his answer was, see things from a different point of view. So without emptiness, putting it simply, we live in this ignorance, this deep, primordial, instinctive, like I said yesterday, primordial grasping at everything as having an absolute, concrete, unindependent nature. We're set in stone. If you think of anybody you know, forget yourself, who's freaking out all the time, having panic attacks, my God, that's disaster, getting angry every second, freaking out up and down like yo-yos, is because their ignorance, the marigpa, this primordial ignorance that grasps at me as absolute and solid and everything else out there as absolute and solid. And it's going from, you go from pillar to post. I mean, talk about bipolar. That's really bipolar, I promise you. Having total ignorance, everything is absolute and concrete, and you're a total drama queen about everything. We know people like that, and we can see that tendency in our own mind. It's because we grasp at things as having an absolute, intrinsic, concrete nature set in stone. That's the way to say it. So what emptiness is, we learn to apply. Okay, the two truths is a really good way to always present emptiness. As Lama Tsongkhapa says, he praises a whole beautiful song of experience written by Tsongkhapa in praise of Buddha for his teachings on dependent arising. So there's the two truths. There's conventional truth, or Lama Zopa calls sometimes illusory truth, because it's not really true. The way things exist conventionally. Then there's the way things exist ultimately. So the shorthand for conventional is the term dependent arising. The shorthand for the ultimate is the term emptiness. So when we hear that mug, that person, I have no existence from my own side, am empty of existing from my own side, have no intrinsic nature, do not exist intrinsically, have no intrinsic characteristics, do not have any natural existence, who do not exist from my own side, who have no self-existence. All these terms are synonymous. When we hear that, we hear, oh, well, there's no I, might as well die. In other words, we fall, as Tsongkhapa says, we fall into the abyss of the great mistake. We think there is no I. We hear as nihilistic. This is the abyss of the great mistake, and that's one of the biggest misconceptions in the world in the misinterpretations of emptiness. Then when we hear dependent arising, that there is an I that does exist interdependently upon causes, dependent upon parts, dependent upon the mind labeling it I. Then we get confused and we think, oh, well, there is an I. And so then we grasp at it and go, thank God there is something after all. So we go like drunken sailors between these two extreme views. We either think something is existing from its own side, or we think there's nothing at all. This is the danger, and this emotionally is how we exist. You think about it, emotionally, this is how we live our lives. Talk about bipolar. We're up and down like yo-yos. When everything goes beautifully, Attachment's getting what it wants. We're in complete heaven. Now I've finally found happiness. Now we will be together until we're 80. Now I've found it. It's going to exist. So we assume it's existing from its own side. We assume it's permanent and unchanging. That's the major mistake. And then when the bubble bursts and your boyfriend leaves you, you go to the nihilistic one and you crash into despair. Nothing exists. Nothing has meaning. And that's when we kill ourselves. So emotionally, we live like this because we have this grasping either at things as having an intrinsic nature. And when attachment gets what it wants, we're all joyful and excited and we set it in stone. Or we go crashing into despair when the bubble bursts and it seems like there's nothing. Emotionally, we understand this. This is the consequence of having this ignorance. The two mistaken views. We go from pillar to post, like going crazy between these two views. So the reality is the two truths are just flip sides of the same coin. So not only do we have to realize that they're not true, but we have to realize that they're not contradictory. So in reality, everything is empty of intrinsic nature because it's a dependent arising. And because the I is the product of many causes and conditions, it is therefore empty of being independent. Because the one word that is covering all of these, intrinsic nature, inherent nature from its own side, self-existent, but the one term is independent. We don't think we think everything has an independent nature, but that's what we have to prove to ourselves. So when we realize that nothing can exist independently of causes, conditions, parts, minds, labeling, etc., etc., we have to realize there can be nothing that can exist in and of itself, from its own side, intrinsically, inherently. Everything exists interdependently. So when His Holiness says, see something from another point of view, it means attachment is seeing it as divine and delicious. And you're stuck in that because attachment is the main voice of the root delusion that believes the cake is intrinsic. So that, you know, to cut the attachment and to cut the view there is delicious divine cake on the plate from its own side, having nothing to do with me looking at it. You look at the cake, you see other aspects of the cake. You look at it from another point of view, and that cuts the ego grasping because you're seeing things you're seeing things interdependently. Because when you're caught up in the thrall of these delusions, which are all the voices of ego grasping, the root delusion, everything appears solid, absolute. And the real mistake, it appears out there. That chocolate cake, when you're in the thrall of attachment, which is the main voice of ego grasping, the root delusion, when you see that chocolate cake, it really does look, doesn't it, like it's out there on the plate, having nothing to do with you as the observer. But the Buddha's saying there is no cake on that plate that doesn't come from your mind. That's the final meaning of dependent arising. The subtlest meaning of dependent arising is dependent upon the mind labeling it. And we know it's true because after 5 pieces of cake, now look at it. There's a few pieces missing of that delicious cake on that plate, but you know, it still looks now repulsive. It doesn't look delicious anymore, which proves attachment was lying to you. But we fall into this trap every time. We don't join the dots. That should be enough to realize emptiness right there, that the cake has no intrinsic nature. That's why the yogi in Tantra can see the cake and not fall into the trap of believing in the delicious cake, or believing even more subtly in the intrinsically delicious cake. The cake is still there. They have a body of the senses, but they're no longer caught up in the lies. So they're able to have the cake, experience incredible bliss because they see it's empty, because they're not caught up in it. That's the tantric approach. And that bliss can be utilized. That's the point. So form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Let's look at that. David brought that up. What Buddha's telling us there is the two truths are uncontradictory. So he mentions form, which is the first of the 5 aggregates, because he says in the Heart Sutra, he goes through all the different groupings of phenomena according to the Buddhist worldview. First, he talks about the 5 aggregates, and he talks about the 6 senses and then the 6 objects of the senses and the 6 sense bases. There's 18 constituents. Then he talks about the 4 noble truths, and he talks about the 12 links of dependent arising. He mentions these different groupings of phenomena, and every one of these, we need to see them, that they have no intrinsic nature. So he uses the one example of the first of the 5 aggregates, and he says form, which is just referring to the physical, that's all. And he says form is empty. Then he says emptiness is form. Then he says form is nothing other than emptiness, and emptiness is nothing other than form. So all he's saying, I mean, not all, but forgive me, but what he's saying, he's telling us, you can use any word. We'll use thermos, form, anything you want to say. Just to use the example, let's say thermos. So thermos is empty. So spell it out. This conventional phenomenon called thermos, which we have labeled and defined, there's a thing that holds your tea and keeps it hot. You've got to define yourself first, define the word. So we label this a thermos. Form is another label. All the other millions of labels of the conventional phenomena. So form, thermos, is empty of intrinsic existence. He's saying that. And now listen. And now he's saying the emptiness of intrinsic existence of this form, the emptiness of intrinsic existence is the form. This is thermos. So thermos is empty of existing from its own side. Okay. Thermos is empty of intrinsic existence. Thermos, the conventional reality, is empty of intrinsic existence. And then he's saying emptiness is thermos. So what he's saying is the emptiness of intrinsic existence exists on this thermos. In other words, you can't have a thermos without the characteristic called emptiness of intrinsic existence of the thermos. You can't have a conventional phenomenon called a thermos without simultaneously observing that it has the characteristic called emptiness of intrinsic thermos. So the quality called emptiness of intrinsic thermos exists right here on the conventional thermos. So thermos is empty of intrinsic existence. The emptiness of intrinsic existence of the thermos exists right there on the thermos. And then thermos is empty, emptiness is thermos, thermos is nothing other than emptiness of intrinsic thermos, and emptiness of intrinsic thermos is nothing other than thermos. So you can't have conventional without the ultimate, because emptiness of intrinsic existence of David, the emptiness of David is a conventional phenomenon, David. But David has a characteristic on him called emptiness of intrinsic David. So you can't possibly find a conventional David without the emptiness of intrinsic David. And if you find something called the emptiness of intrinsic David, it has to exist right there on conventional David. So David is empty, emptiness is David. David is nothing other than emptiness, emptiness is nothing other than David. So the two truths go together, in other words. Whereas the big mistake is emptiness is nothing. And that's the worst, that's falling into the abyss of the great mistake. So wherever you find emptiness, you will find it is the emptiness of the intrinsic characteristic of that very phenomenon. And every phenomenon that exists in the universe lacks inherent existence. When we can start to put these two truths together and realize they're pointing to the same thing. If we hear emptiness and we go sailing off into the abyss of the great mistake in this one way, and then we hear dependent, we hear there is something existing, we grasp at it this way, we're going in the wrong direction. We've got to go towards the direction of the middle way. And the real middle way is finally when you're a Buddha and the appearance of dependent arising and the appearance of emptiness are simultaneous. That's the real middle way. So the two truths lead us to the middle way. And even intellectually, we can begin to understand that conventional refers to the ultimate, and the ultimate refers to the conventional. Then we are going in the right direction. We will not lose the plot. This is what Tsongkhapa says. All right, David, any questions on that? Clear?
Yes, Mirror
David,
has
just a
a
minute.
question.
Just a second. David, any questions on that? Was that clear? David?
Well, could you say that, could you run by the same treatment for feeling?
Everything.
And I'm
Everything,
confused about,
everything that exists, David. Feeling, the state of mind called feeling, is empty of intrinsic existence. And where you find the emptiness of intrinsic existence of the feeling, you will find the conventional feeling. Same, everything that exists, you can posit any word you like there. It's exactly the same discussion. Because everything that exists is empty, and everything that exists has a conventional character, but they refer to the same thing. You can't find one without the other. This is the point. That's what Buddha is telling us. The two truths come together. In other words, let's speak simply. We can see this thermos is black, right? Can't we? We can see it's black. It has a characteristic called black. So you could say thermos is black, black is thermos, thermos is nothing other than black, and black is nothing other than thermos. In other words, you can't separate the black from the thermos. Black is a characteristic of this thermos. So emptiness of intrinsic existence is the characteristic of this thermos. So thermos is empty. Thermos is empty of intrinsic existence, and the emptiness of intrinsic existence of the thermos is the thermos. It's like saying that. This is what we've got to get used to. Emptiness is a characteristic of whatever exists. Emptiness is a characteristic of whatever exists. Emptiness is the characteristic of whatever exists. So you can't separate the thing and the emptiness. That's all. Who else has the question there? You said. Mary?
Mirrorwood has a question.
Good, darling. Talk to me.
I have a question, really a practical question about Tantra, I think. If Tantra is the shorter method to enlightenment, and as has been asserted, and it's a good thing for our dark age, as has also been discussed, and we are not monks, and we are not in that kind of really intensive Sangha, how do we actually guide ourselves to get to the point of preparing ourselves properly, of being able to take the Bodhisattva vows, able to take the Tantric vows, so we can actually practice Tantra, so we can actually not just...
There's no difference between a layperson, but in Tantra, there's no difference between a layperson or a monk. No difference. Why are you asking?
Because I don't see how we get there. That's
the same methods. The method. No, I'm repeating the answer, darling. All the methods and the teachings are there. Whether you practice music 10 hours a day or 1 hour a day, it's the same teachings. So it's up to you.
Could actually do this, let's just say this is the extreme, but you could do this without a teacher?
Who's implying you shouldn't have a teacher? What's that got to do with the price of fish? What's it got to do with being wait a minute, stop. What's it got to do with being a monk and having a teacher, and not being a monk and not having a teacher? Where's that implied? Where'd you get that information from? It's meaningless. It has no basis in any reality whatsoever.
Well, if you don't live near a Dharma center with a teacher...
That doesn't mean you don't have a teacher, Mary. It doesn't mean you don't have a teacher. My Lama Yeshe, my teacher, died 40 years ago. I've still got a teacher. He's in my mind. I do all my practice in relation to him. That means we have to learn to know more understanding of Guru Yoga. We have to practice it. We'll do that after our break. It's got nothing to do with being physically in front of a teacher at all. Nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that at all.
Did have Lama Yeshe. I mean, he was very powerful.
Well, then you can find your own teachers. Where's your problem? You're pretty devoted. I can hear that. How come you haven't found your teachers yet? They're all over the world. The world is crawling in good Dharma teachers. How come you haven't found one?
Well, I'm not busy
your
with
job.
Teachers. I'm just trying to figure out how to do this properly.
Darling, wait, Mary, I hear your question, but it's a false question. But there's an assumption in what you're saying, that because you're not living in the Dharma center, because you're not living 24-hour days among other practitioners, because you're not living in front of your Lama, that you can't practice. That's what you're suggesting, isn't it? May I ask that? Is that true? Is that your suggestion?
I can't practice with that level of intense guidance. That would
clearly you can't. No, it's obvious you can't. It's like you saying, if I don't have Roger Federer in front of me 7 days a week, I can't become a tennis player ready for Wimbledon. You are right, baby. So you got to make a decision.
You mean to make a decision to join a monastery, or to just...
Or make a decision to do it full time. It's up to us, darling. This is the point. I know your point, but that's up to us. Do we want to go play Wimbledon or not? Do we want to become a Buddha or not? The ideal scenario, yes, is give up sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Give up husbands and mortgages and dogs and cats and bloody, pension plans and movies and sleep and pissing and shitting. Yes, give the lot up, girl. But who's qualified, Maywood? 99% of it are not. So we do it according to our pace, and you aim for that. And then maybe 3 lifetimes you'll be ready for it. We've got to be where we're at, sweetheart. That's the point. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm kind of a New Yorker and I like things to happen yesterday. So yes, I'm hearing you very much.
Well, honey, if you want to make it yesterday, you can. There's a possibility. You just got to be a fanatic like all these yogis. They're all fanatics, I promise. You got to start not sleeping like Lama Zopa, you know, but we're not ready for it. So we've got to aim. It's a path we're on. It's a map we're on. We've got to know where we are on that map, Maywood, and we do according to our own pace on that map. So you want to become a Buddha, so you aim for it. And then you do all the practices, sow the seeds, keep your vows, and next life you maybe be able to be born to a mother and a father where you can become a totally devoted practitioner from the age of 4 or something. That's a possibility. You just have to want it and sow the seeds for it. That's about karma.
I see.
You get my point here?
I do, yes.
Yeah, go for it, girl. Keep moving. I think have a break now. It's been 2 hours already. No, it's been 1 hour. That's enough. Have a break. Who's in charge today? I can't see who's there. Is Dundrup there today or somebody else?
I'm the
Mary.
boss today.
Okay,
Yeah.
Mary. So what's our next bit of schedule? Just an hour and a half off or something?
It was 45 minutes. It was going to be 2 to 2:45. So it's 1:15 now. We could
Oh, I
resume.
see. Resume when? What time?
If you want a 45-minute break, we could come back at 2.
We can come back in an hour.
Okay.
Quarter past 2 New Mexico time, okay? In an hour and a quarter. In 1 hour from now, okay? 1 hour. I'll see you in an hour, folks. Thank you, darling.
2:15.